Today we're going to be chatting about this book with a beautiful cover, A Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping by Sangu Mandanna. This book is fantasy dealing with specifically witches and magic, and I would classify it as romantasy as well because there is a central romance in this book, although it takes a little while to unfold, which I prefer. Let's start off with the things I loved about this book. This book was such a cozy read. I find the author's writing style very unique to her, and it's very quirky and whimsical and fun to read. I've also read her earlier book called The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches, and I enjoyed that book as well. These two books are very similar in terms of the overall themes, the writing style, the character development, and the like. So if you've read The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches, you may like A Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping as well. Before I go on, I want to give the standard warning that there will be spoilers in this review, so if you haven't read this book yet and it's on your TBR, then I'd suggest exiting this video and coming back later when you've read the book. In this book, we meet 15-year-old Sarah, who is the main protagonist. She is a very powerful witch, even at that young age. Sarah is among the two most powerful witches in this British guild of witches. But when she was 15 years old, her beloved great aunt died, and Sarah used a resurrection spell to bring her back, which basically depleted a lot of her magic. She was also exiled from the guild for this spell because the spell is highly illegal. So Sarah spends the next 15 years essentially trying to get her magic back, and the plot revolves around that, along with this overall theme of found family and finding a place of belonging. I really loved the magical components in this book. I found them to be really interesting, and again, it was just a very cozy read, and I wanted to come back to this book all the time. I constantly wanted to read this book. Another thing I really loved about this book were the characters. I found the characters had a lot of personality. They had their own unique personalities. They were all very quirky and endearing. There were quite a few moments in this book that made me chuckle, and overall I just thought it was such a fun read, a very fun and uplifting read. I've already talked about this being a romantasy that unfolds really slowly, and I liked that about this book. While there were some things about the romance between Sarah and Luke that made me feel quite cringy, and I'll talk about that more a little later, I will say that I found this romance very palatable at the beginning of the book, all the way until the scene where they have their first kiss. I didn't feel that the romance needed to be in this book because I found the platonic relationships and this whole idea of found family, I found these relationships so strong that the main romance, I felt like it didn't even need to be there. Those were the main things I loved about the book, and I would say I loved 90% of the book, and I was thinking, could this be a 5-star book for me? At the very least, it would be 4.5 stars. But then we got to the last 10% of the book. I am sad to say that I found the ending to this book so unsatisfying. I would even say that it was probably the least satisfying ending I've ever read in a book. It was just... oh, I was so disappointed in the ending. First of all, Sarah does get her magic back, and she is giddy, she is over the moon, she's so happy, this is what she always wanted. And a couple of scenes later, she willingly gives up that magic in order to take the magic of Albert Gray, who is the most powerful witch in this guild. She does it for very good reasons. He's dangerous, he abuses his power, he's just generally a pretty horrible person, but I felt so sad that this happened. The author was trying to make a point that magic isn't everything. This found family is more important, this place of belonging. So that's fine that Sarah decided to give up her magic. I had suspected that this was going to happen because there were things in this book that foreshadowed this ending. What I really didn't like about the ending of this book, though, was the last chapter, chapter 36. If you read this book, I would even suggest skipping chapter 36 altogether. Chapter 35 ends in a really poignant way, and while I didn't want it to be over, I wanted Sarah to get her magic back. I wanted some glimmer of hope there, and I guess there was a little bit of a glimmer because she has like 1 star. That's like the entirety of her magic now, but I still wanted Sarah to have her magic and have her place of belonging. So if this book had ended with chapter 35, maybe I would have still given this book a 4.5, but this book does have a chapter 36, and I did not like that chapter whatsoever. First of all, it just wraps things up in a way that seems really fluffy and strange and not really adding much information. But the worst thing about this chapter is an exchange between Sarah and Luke. Luke is essentially expressing his love for Sarah, but in a really weird and jealous and possessive way, where he says, "When I look at you, I think mine." And Sarah seems to like this, and I was like, what happened to your personality? Did it go along with the magic? It just seemed so out of character for both of these characters, and the entire exchange was just cringy and awkward, and I think quite awful. So while chapter 35 left me feeling kind of sad, but okay with the ending, chapter 36 gave me the ick. It just was not for me. I find the ending of a book really affects my impression of the overall book, and I was so tempted to give this book maybe like a 3 or 3.5, but I'm gonna give this book a 4 because I did enjoy the first 90% of the book, even though many of the plot points are predictable. So for example, you know Sarah is gonna get her magic back, you know Sarah and Luke are going to get together. You know there's going to be this found family at the end where people find a sense of belonging. I would even say that Sarah choosing to give up her magic was a predictable plot point, but there were still a lot of fun surprises in this book. So for example, I really loved the spell that Sarah has to cast in order to get her magic back, because the spell is what they call an adaptable spell. It adapts to the witch who is casting it. And it was neat to see Sarah try to figure out what these ingredients actually could be and how her found family helps with that. I loved that part of this book. One thing I was surprised by in this book was Clemmie's betrayal. I didn't see that coming, but in hindsight, I can see that that was part of her character. I did feel quite a strong sense of betrayal to the point that I was not too pleased with Clemmie's happy ending. Here's the listing for A Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping. It got an average rating of 4.12, and it's categorized as fantasy, romance, cozy, witches, cozy fantasy, etc. I'm going to do something a little bit different with the reaction portion of this video. Instead of going through each of the star ratings, I'm just really curious about what people thought of the ending, so I'm going to focus on that. I'm going to filter the reviews. I want to see the newest first and reviews in English. I'm also going to type in the keyword ending, and I'm going to read a bunch of reviews in order, not worrying about the star category this time. Starting with the first review by Madeline, 4 stars. Didn't 100% love the ending, but I also saw it coming. Next review is by Jamie, also 4 stars. Love the story, hated the ending. I won't ruin the ending, but I will say that I was incredibly disappointed by the author's decision after all that effort of the main character. I 100% agree with this. Kate also rated this book 4 stars. It was a nice ending, but not the ending I wanted. LMAO. Alyssa also gave the book 4 stars. Didn't love the ending. I get why it ended the way it did. I just don't like it. And I agree with this too. I think I said something very, very similar. Here's a 3-star review by Samantha. It had a good storyline and great ending. I thought this was interesting because I gave the book a higher review, but I hated the ending. Becky gave this book 3 stars. The ending felt a bit rushed, and I agree with this as well. Roxalana gave this book 3.5 stars. I will say that the ending did feel a bit rushed, and I wasn't truly invested in the main love story. Once again, I agree with this. Kelly only gave this book 2 stars, saying the ending was lame. I wish Kelly had elaborated in this review because I would love to know the details of why this was the case, because I think so far most of these reviews are referring to Sarah giving up her magic and not really referring to the last chapter where Sarah and Luke have that interaction. That was the main issue for me. Jordan gave this book 3 stars. The ending really fell flat for me. I'm reading a book like this for a happy ending, and it simply kicked the main character while she was down instead. So again, I think this is referring to Sarah losing her magic. Sarah was such a strong character for 90% of this book, and at the end she loses her magic and she becomes like all smitten with Luke, not even clapping back at his jealous, possessive comment. Maybe this is meant to be playful banter between the two characters, but I feel like old Sarah would have clapped back. So I thought this character lost a bit of herself by the end of this book, and I'm not only referring to her magic. Here's a 4-star review from Sarah, and I'm just going to scroll down a bit. The commentary about the ending is further down on the page. Hated that after the entire book's plotline of Sarah fighting to get her magic back, she gets it back for 2 pages only to willingly lose it again. I absolutely hated it. I get that the author wanted to make a stronger point about magic being more than just spells and power, but Sarah deserved that full happy ending, especially after everything she had been through. I totally agree with this, and I feel like I made very similar comments in the opening portion of this video. I could keep reading these reviews forever because they're really helping me to process my thoughts and emotions around this ending and how disappointed I was. But let's just do a few more because I'm sure this is getting rather repetitive to watch. Farah gave this book 3 stars. This ending pissed me off so much. I am sticking to 3 stars rating because up until this ending, I was more or less having fun. I understand where this reviewer is coming from. While I wasn't angry at Sarah giving up her magic, I did feel angry after reading that exchange between Sarah and Luke, the one I've mentioned a few times in this video. But I also did stick with a higher rating. For me, it was 4 stars because I did love the first 90% of the book quite a lot. Here's a 5-star review by Charla, and this is the first 5-star review we've encountered that also mentioned the ending. I wish for a bit of a different ending, but that's just me. I don't think it's just you. I think a lot of us wished for a different ending. Diana gave this book 3 stars. I don't think that ending was a happily ever after, and I am not a fan of Clemmy, but foxes are cunning after all. I'm so glad someone mentioned Clemmy because I was kind of disappointed by Clemmy's happy ending and how quickly Sarah was to forgive her. I also didn't like that Clemmy was able to find the inn after betraying Sarah, but I guess the inn knew that Clemmy was going to try to help. But this is an interesting comment because Clemmy does take the shape of a fox for the majority of this book, and I didn't think of it this way, but yes, foxes are cunning creatures. Let's read one more review, and I'm glad we're ending on a happy note. This review is by Abby, and Abby gave this book 5 stars. I've seen a few reviews that didn't like the ending, but I think it was the perfect ending. That is going to be it for my review of A Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping. Thank you all so much for watching this video. If you've read this book, I would love to hear your thoughts. What did you think of it overall? Did you like the general plot? Did you like the characters? Did you like the romance? Did you like the ending? Thank you again for watching this video. I'll be back very soon with another one. Until then, please take care and bye for now.